Hey guys, Mike here. Welcome back to another video. And what a morning it's been. I mentioned it in the last video that I'd killed the turbo. My fault. So you can see in the Jeep, everything's been pulled out. And I've inspected the turbo, and as I suspected, the turbo seal has gone. It's a real shame that less than a year on, I killed this turbo. And this isn't a cheap turbo. This is a Garrett GT2052. And it was brand new when I bought it, made in the UK. Nice turbo. If you look at the turbo, there can be side-to-side play because that's taken up by oil pressure, but there should be no front-to-back play, like in-out play like this. And you can see that I've got about 1 millimetre of in-out play. There's a real simple reason why it happened, and it's no fault of the turbo, it's my fault. And it's this old thing here. I was going to make a Black Mamba joke, but it's not thick enough. It kinked like that at the bottom, and oil couldn't return into the sump, and you can kind of see where it spewed out of the wastegate actuator hole. So if you remember my previous setup, there was a lot of T-sections, and I'm going to try and eliminate that now. You have 3 points along the oil gallery where you can kind of tap in bungs. So I got these bungs here, and I'm thinking about drilling that out and welding in this 1/8 MPT bung in here and making that the oil pressure gauge and the oil temperature gauge, so that the other line that comes from there just goes directly to the turbo. Measure the old bunger, 12 mil. So that looks pretty good. Just going to pressure test it officially. Yeah, about 10 psi. Right. Probably should pressure test that again. So there it is, all completed. Just put some paint on it. This is high temperature engine paint. I had a few issues with the manifold and the studs breaking, but basically I've put some new studs on, and I've got these capped nuts, so I'm going to try and make these work. And they're really just to help stop corrosion forming on the ends, so when the nut then is taken off, it comes off a lot easier. That's my thinking anyway, a little bit like wheel bolts and stuff. But I'm just putting on this high temp paint, 1800 degrees C. So it should stay on there. I'm going to do the same with the turbo as well, which has just arrived. So just preparations at the moment. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now that that's installed, I want to make sure it isn't going to leak before I put everything back together, or else accessing it's going to be a pain in the ass. So there we go, no leaks. So I'm ready to reassemble now, which is great. So all I'm doing now is like orientating the whole thing. It's pretty easy to do. Basically, just loosen the bolts, and you can like rotate the housings front and back, and basically just get it all set up how you want it to be, like the positioning of it. There we go, it's on. Now that all the fittings are on, I'm going to set up the wastegate. The other one I set manually to 20 psi. From the factory I think it's 7, but I usually just put my hand on the actuator just to feel it, 'cause it's hard to look at two things at once, and then slowly put air in, and it's starting to move just above 1 bar, so I guess that's what, like 17 psi. It's beginning to open. I'll wind that back a couple of turns. Just start big. Go big or go home, right? There we are, and then put it straight on. Let's see where we are. Okay, just starting to open at 20 psi. So just going to go back one turn, well, one complete rotation. Let's see how we go. Starting to put some air in, and there we go, 19 psi. Wastegate's beginning to open, and now it's pretty open at 20, and you know it's fully open at 2 bar. So I think I'm going to roll with that. Changing out the hose. This is the one that comes with the Garrett with these clips here, but it can't really take too much pressure, really, I've found it, and it seems to go squishy and break and stuff, so just putting this tougher piece of hose on. I've made up some studs. It's not made of the best material, but it's really all I've got, and I've used a bit of copper grease in there and stuff. Hopefully that'll stop any seizing. But let's just take a moment to appreciate these welds. Just have a good look at them. They have held up great. There's actually no cracks or leaks, but you can see this is double layered, so that piece there is going under there and just welded around there, so that's probably why it survived. But that was my first time with nickel rod, and as you can see, I didn't do the best job, but it will be wrapped and you'll never see it again. The thing is though, that's a pretty big hole, and I want it to stay like that because then the gas is going to escape really easily. But if I put that back, that little whatever you call it, that seal over there, that packning, that's Swedish, what do you call it, gasket, yeah, that goes over there like that. It will work, but it reduces the size of the opening quite a bit, and it is kind of good to keep it like that because that's kind of a big opening there. But if you pop that in, you're kind of making it a little bit smaller. So I need to find one of these that's just slightly bigger. Well, it turns out I don't need to find a bigger one. I've just stretched it using my thumbs. Although this is stainless weld and stainless pipe, and these are stainless nuts, this flange isn't stainless, and these obviously these studs aren't. So corrosion's kind of the enemy of this stuff when it comes to taking it apart. Just soaking some heat wrap, not because I think there'll be a massive performance gain. There probably really isn't any noticeable one with an engine like this, but it's more to protect other components in the engine bay. The shiny gods are shining down upon me today. Look at the fucking shinies on that. There we go. So that's it. That's the old the build basically done. I'm not going to do any more with the wrap on that. I just quite like that. Before, the shiny stuff looked a bit crap. So you know, it's ready to roll, ready to install. So I'm just going to drop that in the engine now and begin the other shit. Okie dokie then. Let's see how this goes. It's got to go down there like that. It's the oil drain that will probably give me a few problems, which it is. There we are. Well, it's almost all installed. So yeah, I'm just taking my time with the install and just checking everything twice. I've just lost a nut, you bastard. Gone underneath somewhere. Hey, you bastard. You're a f***ing bastard. Right, that one will do. But there we go. all done. That was a pain in the ass job, but the downpipe is bolted to the side of the block using a U-bolt and a stainless bracket that's on like a polyurethane bushing, but a very small polyurethane bushing, and there's a very tiny amount of movement, but barely any at all. But the idea is the downpipe, the turbo, all of that stuff, the engine, it's all locked together as one. So when you start the engine, that can all shake and wobble. When the engine wobbles around, it all moves. And that's why the downpipe hasn't cracked yet, most likely. And then if you look at the exhaust, it has a flexi on the back of it, so the exhaust can wobble around, but the engine and the transmission and all that sort of stuff is locked together. So that's something you've got to think about really if you're going to build stuff like this, because if that downpipe wasn't connected at its very end to the bottom of the block, it would have cracked ages ago for sure. All the studs would have snapped somewhere, or something would have happened, but it's all bolted in, it's looking good. Now it's time to pressure test it. Alright, let's see if we've got any hissing. We are going to lose pressure, it's pretty normal, but it's how fast you lose pressure really. You want it to hold pressure well for a long time. Wastegate should start moving. So it's holding pressure pretty good. You can hear a leak there. Yeah. Now obviously I just need to sort that out, because that ain't working so good. So pressure's dropping a lot slower. Obviously we've just got a bit of air coming out of positive crank, but that's good. It looks like the main leaks are just this hockey puck. So that's really positive. No leaks, basically no boost leaks, and a pretty normal pressure drop, because obviously the engine's cold, so the air's going to be shooting down and coming out the crank and all that kind of stuff. But obviously the main leak just being this thing here, but that's not a big issue. My main concern was leaks around the back of the turbo housing, like the cold side. I'm basically done with installing the turbo. That was a shit ton of work. You know, I prefer it a lot more this time round. I'm really glad that the oil pressure analog and the oil temp is down by the block and not up here. And up here we've pretty much got just a direct feed straight to the turbo. Just putting a little bit of oil through the turbo. A better way of doing this is probably just taking the glow plugs out and cranking the engine over for sort of 10 seconds or something, but don't really want to do that. I've just filled it up with oil, about 6.5 litres to be exact, and I've used a pretty decent oil as well. I always try to use, you know, good oil with this particular engine, you know, just to keep it going and stuff. So we'll see what happens. Now's the time to start it up. So I'm going to open the doors. I've got to now idle the turbo for, probably going to idle it for 10 minutes, something like that. So I've had the engine running for about 15 minutes and it sounds good and everything's running fine. The oil drain's working great, which is really good. I've had my eyes on the gauges and you can see the electronic oil sender on top of the turbo isn't working, but the analog one on the side of the block is working great, and that obviously tells me oil temperature as well. So that's a very useful thing to have on board. I do have the original oil sender just here. That was the one that actually worked with this vehicle. It's a 3-pin. And when I took it off, when I was originally doing this build over a year ago, it broke. I mean, it's been in the vehicle for 25 years, so the brass broke, the connector snapped off, it just couldn't handle the abuse I was giving it. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I tried to find that one again, discontinued part, and when I have found it, it's been like over 250 euros. I mean, I'm not spending that kind of money on that little sensor, basically. And I think going forward I'll just find a standalone sensor with its own gauge and a little alarm on board. But it'll be nice to have oil pressure on the block and the turbo. Obviously the turbo is like an extremity of the engine, so if that line goes I won't know about it with regards to oil pressure until it begins to drop and it squirts all its oil everywhere. So yeah, that is something I will do going forward. I also got some new armour to go underneath. Those are like rock rash plates. If you remember, I've done tons of videos about building wheel wells and installing those rock rash plates I've got under the box rockers, and they're just there really to stop sandblasting of the floor pans and corrosion and future problems, and they're probably one of the most essential things I think I did on the vehicle. But I got some new ones. A mate of mine made me those up in Jokkmokk. Cheers, Harold. He dropped them off recently. Those should make tons of noise. My plan is like, while we're driving the gravel roads, I'm hoping they'll make as much noise as possible so I can't hear Meg telling me what I'm not allowed to buy next on the Jeep. But other than that, I'm really loving the engine bay now. I'm glad I revisited this job. I'm gutted and begrudged that I had to replace the turbo. I wish it didn't come to that, but that's my fault. I was lazy, I used the wrong hose. One thing I have actually done on this going forward is built a solid oil drain. So it's like got a 16 to 17 mil internal diameter straight off the bottom of the turbo with just a small bit of rubber hose, then connecting it to a corresponding nipple with a curve in it that goes on the side of the engine block. But I've talked the crap out at the end of this video. I just want to end it by saying, to all those people asking me questions on Instagram about the pump swap and the turbo build, do remember that I'm not an expert. I'm not some like VM specialist expert guy. I'm very much a sort of experimenter. I'm an expert turd polisher. I will wear that medal, but I'm not an expert mechanic or engine builder or tuner or all that kind of stuff. I am very much an amateur, just a hands-on amateur guy who likes to try his hand at stuff through enjoyment and also through necessity, because this kind of work's expensive. I like improving on things. A big part of this isn't the mechanical stuff for me. I'm actually completely tired of this shit now. I want to be out enjoying the vehicle, driving a couple of hours north, going to national parks, hiking, fishing, camping, doing all that stuff. That's why I've built this vehicle, not to be in here. But obviously, due to my amateurish nature, I blew a turbo up because I thought this Black Mamba would be really useful as an oil drain, and it's completely the wrong material and basically cost me, quite a lot of money. So, just remember that I can't give advice to people on like specific turbos. My advice would be, if you're looking at a turbo, look at the compressor map and try and sort of get to understand how compressor maps, like what they mean, and that will then help you choose a turbo. When I first got into turbo, bought a turbo for this, I didn't look at a compressor map. I just bought the turbo based upon like horsepower and what litre engine I thought it sort of recommended it go with. It turned out to be completely the wrong choice, because it could only really then begin to spool up at 2,500 RPM, which is way too high for this thing. So then I started to look into compressor maps, and I had a look at the compressor map of the GT2052 and what other engines people were using it on, which were around about the same size engine as this, TD engines like 1.9 to 2.5, what kind of horsepower people were making. I basically asked a guy on YouTube, I think it's CPS Customs or something, like he's an engine tuner, what he thought, and he said he recommended that it would be a very good match for this engine, and it was. So, I sort of did as much research as I could, but I had to validate my lack of knowledge with someone's certainties, with someone's knowledge, because I'm not an expert. So do remember that. I don't ever want to come across on this channel like I'm some kind of pro at all this kind of shit, because I'm not. I make a lot of mistakes, and that's part of the journey. That's part of the journey for me, and then part of the enjoyment as well. When it costs me a lot of money, yeah, that sucks, but I enjoy the problem solving and everything else, and then I obviously more than anything love using the vehicle, and ploughing through the snow and having fun and doing all that kind of stuff. So it's a machine at the end of the day to take you somewhere, and then your legs are the other machines that then take you further when the machine can't go any further. So if you are doing this build, do bear in mind that it's a very involved project, and it's very much a prototype, like untested kind of thing. I've only run this for a year, you know, it should be fine, but you never know, something might go wrong again in the future. You just don't know. So it's not like a bolt-on kit. You buy, you put on the vehicle, you get extra power and everything, and yuppie, off you go for whatever you want. You know, it's something that you know, it just, yeah, you get what I'm saying basically. But anyway, I've talked enough. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. You probably haven't. You're probably asleep. Hopefully that woke you up. Just making sure I'm saying goodbye. See you in the next video really soon. Thanks for all your support. Take care.